Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Columbus Cartoon Coalition here on YouTube. I am Kelci D Comics here on YouTube. I am one of the executive members for the Columbus Cartoon Coalition, and I am joined today by
AJ. You can find me primarily on Instagram at AJ Easterday 8. I am a comics editor and publisher. I run a little small press called Easterday Editorial. So I have lots of experience on the production side and formatting side of comics.
All right, we're about to get into that topic today because today's topic is how to format comics. And what do we mean when we say formatting comics? We mean not just like finishing the comic, but making it so that you can take it to the printer or post it up online. And those are two very different types of setups. And we're going to get into that a little bit today. A little bit of background for the both of us. AJ, you and I have actually worked on at least one zine project together. Is that right?
Yes.
At least one that I am aware of, because we just finished up the Yip Yip fanzine. So yeah, very good work all around on that one. This is not the first. Is this your first zine that you put together, or is this like because I know you've done zine projects before?
Yes. So Yip Yip was the first fanzine that I ran, but I've been putting together anthologies and zines for about 5 years now. So I actually have a really good amount of experience.
Okay, awesome. So when you first started, did you start just doing like digital publications, or did you do digital and print, or print only?
We did digital and print publications. So I actually got into making zines because I was a part of a small press publishing group when I was in college called Level Ground Comics. Still active today. It's based in Savannah, Georgia, and it's mostly run by SCAD students, so the Savannah College of Art and Design. And it was basically created by a bunch of students who wanted more experience with the production and editing side of comics. And as part of that, we had to learn how to format comics both for print and digitally. And we also worked a bit in the web comic and webtoon space to get experience on that side of things. So while I've never made web comics myself, I do have experience editing web comics because of being part of that group. So I can still talk a little bit about how that works.
Awesome. For my background, I've been doing web comics for just over a decade by this point. I first started back in 2013 with Johnson and Sir, and have just been making web comics since then. And with those web comics, I've done a variety of sizes and a variety of formats, from 3-panel comic strips to manga pages to full-on standard American comic pages, as well as posting on Instagram and Webtoon, and now Tapas. So I cover a wide range is what I'm saying. And that's just for the online sphere of things. I've also done a lot of variety of sizes for print as well. And we'll be getting into that in a bit. So I want to talk a little bit first about the online sphere, because I feel like a lot of people who might be tuning into this are more than likely going to ask their first question: I want to get a comic on Webtoon. How do I do that? And to which, what would be a good pro tip from you for getting comics up on Webtoon?
Yes. Well, Webtoon is quite a different beast if you're used to traditional page format comics, which I feel like when most people are first learning how to make comics, they start with a traditional comic strip or comic page and aren't used to the whole vertical scroll thing. But if you want to be noticed on Webtoon or even a platform like Tapas, those are really designed for the endless vertical scroll. So you no longer think about your story flowing from left to right. We have to start thinking about it flowing from top to bottom. So it does kind of require you to rethink that way. There are also a couple things regarding the webtoon formatting that people might not be thinking of at first. Like they might think they can just get away with rearranging the way they would do the panels on a traditional page and make them flow from top to bottom. But you can't do that because you also have to think about, like lettering for a webtoon is going to be very different than for a page comic, because if you know that your reader is going to be reading on a phone screen, you have to format the lettering and the word balloons to be larger so that people can actually read it on a tiny screen, right? And similarly, even just your panels in general should be larger. In general, you should have like one panel that fits on the phone screen at a time. Sometimes if you're creating a scene that's really fast paced, you can fit multiple small panels in there. But in general, you want to make things large and fill up that phone screen because, like I said, phone screens are kind of small. So if you want people to catch those little details, you have to draw a little bit larger than what you might be used to.
Right, exactly. And if I can get a little nitty gritty on the formatting for Webtoon side of things, because this was the thing that tripped me up when I first started posting on Webtoon. But to get there, I got to explain what the heck DPI or dots per inch is.
Yes.
So for folks who are new, which is probably most of you watching this, dots per inch is often initialized to DPI. Whenever you're sending stuff to printers in particular, a printer will say, I need you to send this at least 300 dots per inch. And that means it's a formatting thing that tells the computer how many dots are in an inch, like a square inch, for any given digital file that it receives. When you want to print stuff, you have to have it at a minimum of 300 dots per inch, like minimum. The higher the dots per inch is, the better quality the print is. And there are some types of printing, like signage or table banners, etc., that will require an even larger number than that. So just be mindful of that and work with your printers, ask questions. But the interesting thing that I saw when I first started posting on Webtoon was that Webtoon requires 350 dots per inch. And that surprised me because most online applications, including Instagram, you can get away with a lower resolution because it's posting online. The lower the resolution is on a given image, the faster it is to load. When I was in school for visual communications technology, they encouraged online images to be 72 dots per inch at a minimum. Any larger than that, and it can take a while for that file to load. So it surprised me then to see Webtoon be like 350, and I'm like, that's print resolution. What? Because like Tapas doesn't have that kind of a requirement, but Webtoon does. So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's good that you pointed out too that Webtoon and Tapas are different, because one of the things I've noticed is every webcomic platform has variations of their rules, so you can't always just make one webcomic and post it everywhere. We'll have to adjust some of your formatting a little bit to be able to get it to all those different platforms. And I would still encourage people to post across multiple platforms and try to get a wider audience, but just be mindful it might take a little bit of extra work.
Yeah, exactly. One of the webcomic artists that I keep tabs on, the Starfish Face, creator of Cast Off Comic. I actually recommend that comic for folks who like fantasy adventure stories. That's not my own comic, but Cast Off Comic is simul-posted on her own official site, on Webtoon, and on Tapas. And I would not be surprised that if another webcomic reader popped up, she would probably format it to post on there as well, because that just expands the audience reach. Because if you're exclusive to just Webtoon, you're missing out on the audience that is almost exclusive to Tapas. And if you're exclusive to Tapas, you're missing out on the audience that would not use either platform and would rather find your own website. So it's always a good idea to like save multiple copies of a given comic and have them sized to fit the parameters of the platforms that you're using. Talking about Tapas, it tripped me up too when I first started formatting the Case of the Wendigo for Tapas. They're actually really picky about how wide they want the comic to be. Because you can't use the same width as Webtoon. Webtoon is generally like you have to have it at 960 pixels at the smallest. Tapas is 940. And even on like a website that I host myself, I usually format those pages to 800. So it's like even smaller than Webtoon and Tapas. But it's just interesting to note and something to keep in mind if you want to publish webcomics online, to keep in mind the parameters of the platforms that you're using. Now, you have posted a lot on Instagram. So thoughts on Instagram?
Yes. So I do post a lot of artwork on Instagram, though I don't have as much experience with like the comic strip style things that people put on Instagram. But I do think that in general, Instagram is an easy platform to work with because the way it works is very simple. Square images look the best on Instagram. Yeah. Just keep everything a square. In fact, most art programs already have a square formatted template that works for Instagram on it. So like if you're using Procreate or Clip Studio, that's what I was thinking of, or even just like Canva also has like a square Instagram template that is like the right number of pixels. So a lot of Instagram templates already exist out there. Just keep everything square. Definitely the traditional Instagram webcomic style is to fit 4 panels in that little Instagram square. Although you don't necessarily have to stick to that, because some people also do like swipe comics, right? Because you can have up to 10 images in one Instagram post. So you could theoretically have it be 10 separate panels that you swipe through. I have seen some people do that successfully. And of course, if you do it that way, you get a bit of a larger area for each of your images. You can put a little more detail in there. So I think either of those formats work well.
Yeah, agreed. And for anybody who is still on Tumblr, I've noticed that Tumblr is getting a little bit of a resurgence lately. For Tumblr, you can use the square format. However, I have seen a lot more success with folks who use the full rectangle, the full like tall rectangle. Doing it vertical rather than horizontal. I've not seen too many people succeed with like a horizontal wide format for their art on Tumblr, but Tumblr also encourages a lot more vertical scrolling like Webtoon and Tapas does. So that keep that in mind if you wanted to post on Tumblr as well. If you're posting like on your own website, then just keep in mind the requirements that your particular software uses. For my example, I use WordPress.org installed on my websites. And WordPress.org has little templates for webcomic posting. And with those, you can pretty much size it to however wide you want the comic to be. It can be like 800 pixels, 940 pixels, 960 pixels. But generally there's like a maximum. So you just got to gauge what that maximum is. The other thing I wanted to bring up with publishing online is RGB versus CMYK and what the heck those letters mean. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. AJ, so thoughts or questions about RGB versus CMYK.
Yes. Well, for anybody who doesn't know what those means, RGB stands for red, blue, green, and CMYK is actually cyan, magenta, yellow, black. So the K stands for black. I don't know why, it just does. Maybe so you don't confuse it with the blue in RGB. But essentially, they're two different color modes. So if you remember back to science class, red, blue, and green are the primary colors of light. So RGB mode are colors that are made to be produced by light digitally, right? So they are viewed best on a digital screen. Whereas CMYK mode, the CMYK are the colors of ink that most printers use. So that is the color mode you want to use when printing. And a lot of times if you're setting up a new art file in whatever digital art program you use, it'll actually like ask you if you want to set it up in like CMYK or RGB. So when you're making that selection, you have to keep in mind, am I planning on this being something I'm going to post digitally or something I am planning on printing?
Yeah, exactly. If my friend Dave were here, he could talk probably for days about why it is that CMYK is called the way that it is and why it is that CMYK is structured so that it utilizes those four colors. At the risk of, I'm not going to go into a side tangent about whether black is a color or not. That's a topic for a different day. But talking about the printing side of things, that actually brings up another series of questions. Before we get to the questions that I got from the Discord server, it kind of looks like I got more questions. Oh, no, that's a different topic. Okay. I thought I got more questions on the Discord server about today's topic, but I have them saved on a document. So let's talk a little bit about formatting for printing. So you've mentioned working in print for a variety of zines. Were they all the same size or were they different sizes? And how did you work with that?
So I've actually always worked with the same size because I kind of found a size that worked for me and I liked it. So I just kept doing it.
Fair.
But I would say what's important about picking a size is making sure you pick at a size that you can actually print, which means the step you have to do before that actually is decide if you're going to print the comic yourself or work with a professional printer.
Yep.
If you happen to have a high quality printer at home and you can print and cut and staple books together yourself, that's awesome. You might actually be able to save some money that way.
Sure.
But I feel like most people work with a professional printer because not a lot of people have, high quality printers at home or know how to bind them themselves. Or if you have like a really large book, you may not even be able to bind it by hand. You got to get like fancy book binding done. So in that case, you'd want to work with a professional printer. But of course, professional printers usually only have certain sizes that you can choose from.
Yeah.
So you're going to want to look at their website and see what all the options are. A lot of printing websites, you can kind of set all the parameters that you want and get a quote from them in advance. So you can actually like go through and see what all their options are and how much it would cost. And so that's kind of where you have to go. And if you're going to pick a size, make sure it's a size that you can print at and that you can afford to print at that size.
Yeah. Oh, I almost forgot to bring up regarding the print versus web publication thing. So this is another thing to keep in mind. Whenever you're working on a file and you're ready to like save the final versions of it, something to keep in mind is the like .jpeg, .png, those types of formats. So when you're publishing stuff online, the best format to use in my experience is .png. While .jpeg does work, the .jpeg format does kind of degrade over time, but .png preserves the quality of the image even after multiple uploads. when you're printing, the best file to save it in is .tiff. If it is at all possible for you to save in .tiff, please save it in .tiff. Your printers will love you, I promise. Even better if you can send them a high quality PDF made up of those TIFF files. But we'll get into that a little bit later when we talk about like what software to use to file or to make the print files for stuff. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But with saving files for printing versus saving files for online publishing, that would be my recommendation. Online.png for print .tiff, which is TIFF. I could not tell you what that stands for. I don't know either. Yeah. Although I'm just going to throw this out there for everybody to just rage in the comments about .gif. I pronounce it jife.
I've heard that one before.
Hey, you know what? I might as well earn the ire of both people on either side of the aisle. That's my reasoning. Anytime I pronounce it any other way, my roommate goes, excuse me, I believe you mean a jife. And I'm like, oh, yes, I do. Thank you for correcting me. But that's just a little thing. Yeah. So, I mean, you can save it as a jife, but jife works better for animations anyway. Which is, we're not even going to get into that right now. Check out Winged Canvas on YouTube if you want to know more about animation stuff. About the printing side of things, what size do you prefer to work in for your printing files?
Yes. So the size that I always work at is 8.5 by 5.5 inches, also known as digest size.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very standard print size because it's literally just your typical like 8.5 by 11 letter size paper folded in half.
Yep.
And part of the reason that size is nice is because if you are printing something yourself from home, you probably have 8.5 by 11 paper. Mm-hmm. So 8.5 by 5.5 book size is easy for you to hand make. Yep. But it's also a very standard size that pretty much any professional printer out there is going to have. And it's a pretty standard comic size as well.
Yeah. Hey, it worked for Archie for decades before they went full-size American comic. So, yeah. I actually have a couple of comics that are printed at digest size, and Canon Wright Productions so far has published their last 2 anthologies at digest size. It's really easy to work with, and like you mentioned, most printers can accommodate a 5.5 by 8.5 sizing. That said, I did want to bring up one of the questions that was asked on our Columbus Cartoon Coalition Discord server. If you would like to join the server, you can hit us up on Instagram and ask for the link that way. But one of the questions that somebody wanted to ask was, how do you figure out bleeds versus page cutoffs? And what does that mean? What do these terms mean? So
this is where we get into the fun printing jargon.
Yes.
These are important terms to know, because if you ever get a job making comics, your editor, your printer, publisher, whoever is in charge of it, is going to tell you, you have to make it this size with this amount of bleed. This is your safe area. So you have to know what those mean, even if you're not the one formatting the final formatting and printing the comic yourself.
Exactly.
So the easiest one to explain is the trim area or the cutoff area. And that is literally the area where your page is cut off. Hold on, let me hold it this way. So this would be the trim area, because it is literally the edge of the paper. And you'll notice some people use slightly different terms. They might say, you know, the cut line, the trim line, but it's where they literally cut the paper to make the edge of the book, right?
Yes.
So you will not see anything beyond that line, except when you're formatting your files, there actually is something that goes beyond the trim line. and
Yep.
that is called the bleed area.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this is an important term to know, and I feel like it's the one that confuses people the most.
Yes.
But essentially, if you have a comic or illustration that goes full bleed, meaning it goes all the way to the edge of the page, I can actually find.
Yeah,
Um,
we have a couple of examples in that zine.
yeah. So here's a double page spread, and you can see there is no border. The art goes all the way to the edge of the page.
And
Um,
we'll be talking about how to do double page spreads here in a bit.
yes. But if you want your artwork to go all the way to the edge of the page like that, which is really nice for those full page illustrations, you need to use a bleed area, which
Mm-hmm.
means you actually extend the artwork beyond the edge of the page. Now, the bleed area you're required to use is going to depend on your printer. Like the printer I use, it's always 1/8 of an inch
Mm-hmm.
beyond the trim line. But always follow the guidance from your printer or your editor, whoever you're working with.
Yes.
Um, but the reason you have to make your artwork actually go beyond the edge of the page is because machines don't always cut things on a perfect exact line. So if
Nope.
you don't add that bleed area, you might actually get a fine white border around your artwork, and it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't look as professional. And trust me, I've done things before where I've accidentally like forgotten a bleed area, or there's like a weird white border or something like that. It doesn't look as nice. So having the bleed area there makes it look much cleaner and more professional.
Yeah, I've encountered many a small press and indie comic that I've picked it up because it looked great on the cover, and then I flip through it, and there are pages that are unevenly cut, and there's like a little white sliver along the bottom, and I'm like, oh no,
Yeah, it
that's
does.
either the printer or the artist.
Yeah. And then the last important term to know is like the safe zone or safe area, or you
Mm-hmm.
might hear it called the live area. That's one I've heard before.
That's
And
the one I've heard the most. Yeah.
yeah, it's basically the area on the page where you want to keep the most important aspects of your artwork and all of your lettering.
Yes.
So this is especially important when you have a book like this. It's like staple bound, and there's this like inner fold, because especially if you have a really big book, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
stuff gets lost in that inner fold.
Yep.
So if you put your lettering too close to the edge there, it could be potential that you don't see it, that when you try to open the book, it doesn't quite open up all the way or lay flat, and then you can't read it
Mm-hmm.
very easily.
Yeah.
There's also the potential that some of it could get cut off if it's on the edge, because like we were just saying, the
Yep.
machines don't always cut it perfectly. So if you have lettering that's close to the edge, it could accidentally get cut off. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so you always want to follow whatever margins your printer or your editor gives you and keep your important things within those margins. It'll usually
Absolutely.
be like a quarter of an inch or so. You can still, of course, have artwork there, but just not any of the super important stuff.
Yes. Actually, I had this handy. I have The Legend of Jamie Roberts Volume 1 here to serve as an illustration because what you have are what we call staple bound books. This is an example of a perfect bound book, which means that it's sealed with glue on the spine. And very important thing to note about this kind of a format of a book is that it is perfectly glued. So that means that your margin is even like it's something to keep even further in mind for a book format like this.
Yes, true.
Yes, absolutely. So whenever you're like formatting your comic page, just note that if there are certain panels that go like towards the edge of the page, they might get lost in the glue. So definitely keep your live areas in mind when you're designing your books.
Yeah. I will also keep in mind, because you brought up perfect bound books, because of the way those books are laid out, it might actually be the case that you need to leave even more of a margin near the spine,
Mm-hmm.
because of the way it folds in. And I know we were going to bring up formatting double page spreads soon because someone asked about that. And I feel like this fits in perfectly. One
Mm-hmm.
of the most important things to remember about double page spreads is not to put anything important directly in the center because it could get lost in the fold line.
Exactly. Yeah. I've not done too many double page spreads. I have done a ton of stuff that goes all the way to the bleed edges. So, yes, absolutely keep any important information away from the spine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that way it can actually be legible. And with your permission, I actually have some files up on Clip Studio Paint to showcase like live versus margin versus bleed and what that might look like on a page.
Of course, yes.
Cool. So I'm just gonna, I should have set this up earlier and then I am doing it now. We're doing it live. Okay, here we are. So yeah, it's showing up. Great. So these are actually templates from a printer called Kablam. And bless Kablam, they have these files ready for you to download. So what we're looking at here is what they call the standard size template. And standard is standard comic page size. So like your Supermans, your Batmans, your Captain Marvels, etc. These are going to be standard size. And those in the final print editions will be 7 inches wide by 10.5 inches high in the final print. So what we're looking at here is our live area, which is in blue. And then we have our trim area, which is where the printer cuts it off. And that trim area, aka the margin, is in yellow here. Zoom in a little bit. And then the red is what is cut off. But if you want to do any art that bleeds, you got to go into the red. That said, keep your speech balloons and any important information in the blue area for sure. The margin is just handy to know for whenever you have art that does go beyond the live area. Very handy for open panels and double page spreads and full page spreads, etc.
Yeah, and while you have this
Mhm.
up, I will add that a lot of professional printers will offer templates for you to use. So if you have a specific size in mind, they will actually give you a template that says, okay, this is where your trim line is, this is where your bleed needs to go. Some of them even have templates available like as Photoshop files. So you already have like the layers in there and such. So that's really helpful. So definitely talk to your printer and see if they have any helpful templates for you to use, and always follow the template.
Yes. And also, depending on if you're lucky enough to work with a publisher, sometimes the publisher will send you the files that you need to work with. For example, when I was lucky enough to work with Iron Circus sent over a couple of different versions of their template files. They sent over a Clip Studio Paint version, a Photoshop version, and one that was just a PNG. But the PNG had everything all outlined.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, publishers will look out for you. At least the good ones will.
Yeah. I was going to say, we even did that on our Yip Yip fanzine. One of our other fellow mods, Moth Rabbits, put together a very helpful template that people could use that had the exact size requirements that I requested. And that's always helpful to have, because even if I try to give really detailed descriptions of the size I want, I feel like I always inevitably have someone who doesn't match that size. But if we have a template, there are way fewer errors that are made. So definitely, if you happen to be an editor or publisher watching this, give your artists templates.
Yes. This is a message to all of the editors and publishers who may be watching this. Make templates. Save your artists the headache. And have them available in different formats.
Because if you don't make the template, like I said, you run into the issue of you have like an artist who made something at the wrong size, and then you're like, how do we edit this so it actually fits the size I wanted?
Yep.
So yeah, it will save you a headache later if you think in advance.
Yes. And if you set those guidelines in advance, honestly, guidelines are just super helpful anyway. Like, I understand that this can dovetail into a conversation about, like, no, I'm creative, I should not have any limits. But in my experience, one of the best ways to get creative is to set limits and be like, oh, I only have this size of a page to work with. What can I fit in there? Types of questions.
That's a good way of looking at it.
Yes, exactly. There's a lot that you can fit on one page of any given comic, honestly. And even one panel, like if you're talking about like Instagram comics or webtoon comics, there's a lot that you can fit into one panel of any given comic. The questions. Yes. One of the other questions that we were asked was, how do you format comics that you want to print eventually but are planning on posting first? Actually, I could answer this one because I have a lot of experience with this. Best way to do it, with your working file, set it to your print resolution. And then if you want to save as, during the save as portion of things, you can usually change the dots per inch to scale it down. With Clip Studio Paint, the easiest way to do this is it's in one of the editing controls. I'm trying to remember which one it is. Oh, it's edit, change canvas size, or change image resolution. Those are your two commands in Clip Studio Paint that you would use to adjust as needed when you're saving the file as. AJ, any thoughts or additions that you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I do want to add to that. So I am specifically thinking about people who want to do a like webtoon style comic that they also want to print later, because obviously the endless scroll webtoon format is very different from the page format. But I know a lot of people who want to have the opportunity to do both. And of course, we've seen a lot of popular webtoons that have later gotten like print editions.
Lore Olympus. Yes.
Yeah. And I was actually going to say, and we can probably all think of a few of those webtoons that were turned into print that didn't get formatted very well because they were not designed for print. And I would actually say that Lore Olympus is one of the worst offenders there. I'm not a fan of the Lore Olympus print edition. I do think that some people have gotten a little bit better at going from digital to print. I would actually point you to the print version of Everything is Fine for an example of a webtoon turned print that I thought was done well. But I know Lore Olympus and Let's Play are two that I would say weren't done very well.
Yeah, like they were definitely made with webtoon in mind first.
Yeah. So one thing you can do is like look at examples of webtoons that have been converted to print and see what you can learn from that. Like, what did you like? What didn't you like? Or I've actually also heard of people who, even though they are planning on doing a webtoon, they draw it as a page first and then adapt it from page to webtoon. A lot of people find going that direction is actually easier. So maybe draw it as a page first and then go back and adjust it to make it a webtoon. As I kind of already mentioned earlier, lettering for webtoon looks very different. So you'll definitely have to like change the lettering going from one format to another.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. Oh goodness. I feel like I had, the last thing I was going to say is you could totally ignore all of this if you wanted and do kind of like what Alice Oseman does, who is the very successful creator of Heartstopper. And even though she publishes on Webtoon and Tapas, which are normally endless scroll comics, she just posts her pages there. They're in the traditional page format, and she literally just stacks the pages from top to bottom.
Nice.
So, and obviously that comic is like incredibly popular and has been turned into a print format and a TV show and all this stuff. So even if you don't follow the traditional webtoon rules, you can still become super famous.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, rules are more like guidelines, as any good pirate would tell you.
And I will say that I think part of the reason that Heartstopper works that way is because Alice Oseman still makes sure that like the lettering is legible. There's not super small details that are hard to look at on a phone screen. She usually just does like a few panels per page, which makes it very easy to read as either a print comic or a web comic. So it works.
Exactly. And that is fantastic. Another question. Oh, we covered how to format double splash pages. And we talked about bleed versus page cutoff. We've talked about formatting for Instagram versus Webtoon and Tapas. And I remember mentioning that we were going to circle back to a topic, but I don't remember what that topic was.
I guess
yes.
There is one more thing I want to talk about with formatting double page spreads, because I feel like one thing that might confuse people is if they are thinking about it as literally two separate pages. Definitely the way you should go about drawing it is thinking of it as just one big illustration. So if you were, working at the size that I normally work at, which is 8.5 by 5.5, you would work at 8.5 by 11 and just kind of double it. And keep the same bleed area going all the way around. You don't have to add extra bleed in that center line.
Yes.
That might be something that confuses people. Just pretend that that spine does this, except for the thing I mentioned earlier about like, don't put anything super important there, obviously.
Right.
But you don't need to like add extra space or anything. Like once you print it, it will work out. The printers will do their printing magic and it will all line up the way it needs to.
Yes, absolutely. While I was thinking about it, I actually wanted to bring up something because I used to, pre-pandemic, I would run workshops for how to make mini comics with Girl Scout troops. And the mini comics that I taught them how to make were little pocket zines. And to illustrate that, I'm actually going to bring up a picture here on Clip Studio. Oh my gosh, work with me. There we go. Okay, these little guys. I used to show the youngins how to make little pocket zines, kind of like these. Not these ones specifically, but comics like these ones. And these are just made out of a single sheet of office paper that you cut in a specific spot, and then you can basically origami it into an 8-page mini comic. And there's a ton of tutorials for how to make these across YouTube. So absolutely look one of those up. As far as if you want to get a good like beginner's taste for how to work with like bleed and getting it print ready and how to make a little comic, these are honestly really good starting points. And I like to suggest these for beginners of any age, regardless of your interests or, your age. Yeah, but I wanted to bring these up because formatting for these is also pretty interesting. Because in my experience, you pretty much just draw them at scale, and then you can just photocopy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is very much not the case for like pretty much any other kind of like print mode. Yeah, usually when working with printers, you send over digital files and the printer will set it up on their end and then they'll print it.
Yeah, which I actually think these are good as practice for if you want to know about like formatting and printing stuff yourself. There are templates you can find online for these little mini zines, or sometimes I actually make a template myself because I have had a few just simple little black and white zines that I printed myself, because if it's just black and white, that's easy to print myself and I don't have to necessarily print it on special paper.
Yep.
But you have to think about like I mentioned before, most books are made from pieces of paper that are then folded in half. So you actually have to think about, okay, like which page do I put on this side and on this side to make it so that when I fold it, it actually like lines up and everything's in the right order. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I literally take like blank sheets of paper and fold them in half and then like label them. This is 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yep. I have also done that.
Fold it so that I can see which ones need to go on which side. So don't be afraid to make your own little template like that. If you have to figure out, okay, like how do I line up these pages so that they actually make a correctly ordered book?
Yes, exactly. That actually reminds me, I'm part of another cartoonist server, and recently somebody shared a little tool that they called a zine arranger. You can actually find it at it's honestly it's a very long like hash address, but if you look it up as a zine arranger on itch.zone, it should pop up. But the little zine arranger can help you arrange little zines like the one I just showed off, or if you're doing like the 5.5 by 8.5, but you're printing it at home and you want to format it yourself, very handy for that as well. So I just want to recommend that that is a tool that exists, and I'm so glad that there was another cartoonist that shouted it out. I will be posting the link on the C3 Discord server. I'm pointing in the right direction, I think. Yes, because C3 also has a Discord server, and we share tips and resources and feedback for various projects. So, I mean, it's a fun place to hang out anyway. But yeah, I will for sure be posting the link on the Discord server later today.
And I realize I think the one thing that we haven't touched on that much yet is actually like formatting software. If you do want to do the formatting yourself.
Yes. Yeah, let's get to that.
Yeah, which is important to know how to do if you are like self-publishing or in the indie world, or of course, like I do a lot of the production side of things. So I taught myself how to format comics, and it's actually one of my favorite parts of the comic making process.
I will keep that in mind for the future.
If you need somebody.
Yeah.
So there's a couple different software programs. That's probably
yes. Yeah.
that you can use for formatting things for print. Definitely the standard professional software. Say hello to my cat.
Hello, cat.
The standard book formatting software is Adobe InDesign. Of course, it's the fanciest book formatting software, but also the most expensive. So if you're not super into book formatting and you don't want to dish out $20 a month, that may not be the best thing for you.
Right.
But there are cheaper options. There's Affinity Publisher, which is
I was about to bring them up. I'm so glad that you mentioned them.
Yes. There's Microsoft Publisher, which I don't have much experience with, but I've heard that you can do some formatting stuff on there. And of course, there's Canva, which is pretty much totally free to use. There is a pro version if you want to have like all the fancy stuff that they offer. But I've honestly done some formatting on Canva when I just need to get something done real quick and easy. So it'll do the job, and it's got a much less of a learning curve than InDesign. So if it's like your first time trying to format something, I might actually recommend trying out Canva, and then you don't have to like spend a bunch of money on a fancy program.
Yeah, exactly. I've actually met quite a few tabletop role-playing game designers who have used Canva to format their digital zines, displaying their rule sets, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, even if you don't do comics and you just need some way to format a zine or a tabletop RPG, Canva is a really handy tool for that.
Yeah. If you are an Adobe person, I will also throw out, I know some people who prefer to do their formatting in Adobe Illustrator instead of InDesign because they just find it more user-friendly, or that's the program they're more knowledgeable with.
Okay.
I will say the reason that Adobe Illustrator and InDesign are the better Adobe products to use and not Photoshop is because Photoshop is a raster-based program.
Yes.
It is better for digital things. It's primarily a photo editing service, right? Yeah. Whereas InDesign and Illustrator are graphic design programs, so they are better suited for design and formatting type of things.
Yes.
So I would definitely like recommend going that route instead of trying to do all your formatting in Photoshop.
Yeah.
Because it won't turn out as well.
Yeah, that and tools like InDesign, and I don't know if Illustrator has this. I never poked around Illustrator enough to find out if they do, but Publisher and InDesign have built-in margin tools so that you can set your margins and then you can work with it that way.
Yeah. They also have just better text tools.
Yes.
So if you are adding text, which I imagine you would be, it's a pretty standard part of graphic design and comics.
Right.
You want to be able to like customize your text, right? And make sure you get the spacing and stuff just right. Obviously, in this little live stream, we don't have time to get into like the difference between all these software programs and how to use them.
Right. Yeah.
But there are a lot of helpful tutorials already out there on YouTube. So I would recommend checking them out. And you can probably even look up tutorials specifically for like, how do I throw together a comic in InDesign, for example.
Yeah. Actually, if I can shamelessly plug for a second, I have a channel. I have a video on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/@KelciDComics. There's a video on there showing how to format books in Affinity Publisher. And it's an entire live stream. So there you go. It's there.
Yeah. I will also add one of the things that's really nice about InDesign, and I know you can also do this in Adobe Acrobat, which is Adobe's like PDF formatter thing.
Yeah.
Is they have a way for you to transition your like to convert your file from the pages being in reading order to the pages being in print order.
Ooh.
Because we were just talking about how when you're actually like printing things and you have to have them the pages fold together and like line up a certain way, they're going to be in like a weird print order.
Yeah.
InDesign has a function, and so does Adobe Acrobat, that'll lay out that booklet for you.
Ooh.
So there you go.
Handy. Heck yeah, that's awesome. All right, so we are approaching the 1 hour mark, and this has been a pretty thorough discussion. Is there anything that you feel like we might have missed that we should mention in the final segment of this show?
I guess the last thing I'll add is if you're someone who is like uncomfortable with formatting comics and you're someone who's new to this, like don't be afraid to ask someone for help. There are people out there where like book design and book formatting is literally their whole job, and they can help answer your questions.
Yep.
Or maybe if you're like, if you want, you can even just like hire someone to do all the formatting for you. That's also an option.
It is. Yeah. And the best way to find the folks who would be willing and able to do that sort of thing is to just reach out to other artists and ask around. If they don't do it themselves, ask if they know anybody who does. And I'm just going to throw this as another little plug for our channel. We have the Columbus Cartoon Coalition Discord server, and we have over 150 members from the Central Ohio region and the surrounding area of cartoonists and other creatives. We are a pretty handy resource for finding like not just artists, but like people for whom formatting books is their jam, and they are the peanut butter.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, this kitty. Does the kitty have questions for us?
Her question is probably, what are you doing? Why can't you give me attention?
Yeah, I will transmit attention from afar. Yes. As for I don't really have anything to add much when it comes to like how to format comics other than if at first you want to do like a test run just to make sure that everything is going to look hunky-dory before you do like a final print, if you can manage to like do a test print at home, give that a try. because some of my cartoonist friends and I still sometimes struggle with saving our print files for printing because it'll look great on screen, and then sometimes in print it'll come out darker than intended, or some of the colors don't turn out right. So, just if at first you don't succeed, tweak as needed, because we touched on this earlier, but RGB, the color scheme for computer screens and other digital displays, is a very different color set from CMYK, which is used by printers. So sometimes, some stuff gets lost in translation. So do test prints. And this is one reason why a lot of printers actually offer print proofs. They will send you a print proof to be like, how do the colors look? Is it okay if we cut this page off here? Here's what it looks like when we perfect bind a book, for example, and that sort of thing. Actually, this is something I wanted to throw out there. Recommended book printers.
Yes.
Yes.
Go-to answer for this. I've had lots of people ask me for printers in the past. So I've only had experience with 2 printers total. The reason I only have experience with 2 printers is once I found that second printer, I was like, I'm never going back. They're the great. I use Mixam.com. It's Mixam. Very good. Part of the reason I like them is they have so many different options. They make it very easy to get a quote online and figure out exactly how much you're going to pay and what you're going to need. They have lots of good cover lamination options.
Yes.
And one of the things that I think is most important, especially in regards to formatting comics, is every time you send a file to Mixam to print, they have a real life human being that goes through your print file and makes sure there are no mistakes. So I've actually had times in the past where they found issues with my file. There were things that were maybe too close to the trim line or typos and things like that. And they've actually let me know and gave me the chance to change it before they just go ahead and print the whole thing the wrong way, right?
Yep.
And I honestly think there's nothing more valuable than knowing that you have a professional printer looking through your file and making sure everything looks good before
Yes, and I can second the Mixam recommendation. And to add a little bit to their customer service awesomeness, because oh my gosh, I've worked with a multitude of printers and I love the customer service for Mixam, because I've actually had it happen multiple times where I just go to upload the files into their little file uploader and it hasn't worked. So I'll call customer service and be like, hey, I can't get this to work. What do? And I'll get in touch with an actual human, and the actual human will be like, oh, just send me the files and I'll take care of it on my end. And they make it happen. And it's great. I love working with Mixam.
Yeah.
Another company I would recommend working with is actually based out of Michigan. And I've only worked with them a handful of times, but every time that I've worked with them, their print qualities, chef's kiss, so good. Comics Wellspring, and that's Comics Comix Wellspring. Highly recommend them. They did the print run for The Legend of Jamie Roberts Volume 2, and it was a pretty beefy print run. There were a lot of copies for that. It was a perfect bound. The pages look terrific. It's so vibrant and it's so colorful, and all of the books were very well wrapped. It was all in very cushy bubble wrap, and there's been no printer errors that I've spotted in this print run, which is good, because the printer who did the first print run of The Legend of Jamie Roberts Volume 1, who I'm not going to name right now, but if you really want to know who it is, just DM me. I will tell you the details. But yeah, no, the printer who did the first print run of this, there was a printer error on one of the pages of chapter 2 on the entire first print run. And it just ruined the book. They did send me free reprints, but I'm definitely not going back to them for any future volumes of this. Yeah. But highly recommend Mix'em and Comics Wellspring. I have worked with both. They are both fantastic. If you need to work with any other format type things, like if you're working with like, maybe you want to do stickers or keychains. On the sticker side of things, I actually recommend Sticker App. I have a cousin who does a lot of work with Sticker App because she does a lot of promotional things for some of the organizations that she works for. And Sticker App does great work. And they have a variety of finishes for their stickers, including holographic. I'm actually looking to print some holographic stickers very soon. And better prices than Sticker Mule. So just gonna throw that out there. And also for folks who want to do keychains, etc., I recommend Vograce. Vograce also does washi tape and a few other types of merchandise. If you have been to an anime convention and you have seen people stock keychains and washi tape and maybe even pencil pouches, that is more than likely from Vograce. They do take a while to ship because they are overseas, but the wait is worth it, I think. Yeah. Also, be willing and able to work with your local printers. Absolutely work with them, especially if you're going to be doing just the small, like if you're doing those like pocket comics like I showed earlier, great resource for that. Okay, final thoughts, if you have any.
Final thoughts. Oh, man. I guess don't forget everything you've been taught about comics and graphic design. Because when you are creating a book or any sort of product, I guess like even if it's a virtual one, a digital product, what people want is something that is high quality and looks good. So that is why we are talking about formatting and giving all this stuff, is you want to create something that is a professional, high quality product that really showcases all your amazing artistic skills. So that is the reason all this weird formatting and graphic design stuff matters, is it's going to make your artwork look better.
Yes, and you want it to look the best that it can. Especially if you want to spread the joy, you got to make sure that it looks the best that it can so that joy can be spread. That's my final thoughts on it. Yeah. So with that, I think that's a good point to start wrapping this up. AJ, where can folks find you online?
Yes. So I'm most active on Instagram. It's at AJ Easterday 8, like the number 8. And I also have an Etsy store, which is where I sell all of my zines and my merchandise. So if you're interested in finding that, it's easterdayeditorial.etsy.com. And you can learn more about the zines I make, including Yip Yip, which me and Kelci worked on. So a little self promo for that one. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Available for sale now.
Yes. Yes. All proceeds benefit charity.
Yes.
Yes. And you can find out more about that. I'm just going to shorthand it and say Instagram.com/AJEasterly8, the link on the screen. And you have a link tree on there that has all of the links.
I do, yes. It has links to like different pages with all my zines, and I actually think the first link on my link tree does take you to Yip Yip, since that's my most recent project, so you can find all the details there.
Sweet. Yes, and for folks who want to find me online, you can find me at kelcicrawford.com. Very simple. It has all of my stuff, my webcomic links, my YouTube videos, and everything else. And be sure to like this video if you liked this video. If you would like to stay tuned for future live streams and tutorials and artist chats, be sure to subscribe. And with that, I think that's good for now. Thank you all so much for watching. You are awesome.
Bye.